Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Happy Monday. I hope you're doing very, very well. I'm back with Rohan, who's back from India, and we've lost George. We're never going to get the three of us together, are we?
We did do one just before India.
It's akin to, and I'm going to make a very good comparison here, akin to Arsenal, who always seem to lose their members, whatever, rubbish. Welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. Thank you all for being here. Yes, looking forward to this one, to chat all things Ipswich. I want to talk Ben White. That's a bit of a sort of rogue topic. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about Saka, etc., etc. We are recording on Sunday evening, so we've just watched Liverpool win 5-0 against Ipswich. It feels like, because we record on a Sunday, we always have a word for Liverpool. And it's like getting harder and harder to find a way of being like, no, I'm not worried. I didn't actually watch the game. How was it?
I watched the first half and just turned it off. I don't know about you.
It's fine,
I don't know about you, but you know when you're watching it and you're doing like, obviously with what's on the line and a team is doing very well. Liverpool, in this case, I can't lie. Every time I see like they go, well, it's 2 or 3-0 up, I just turn it off. So I just waste my time watching the rest of it. I could be doing something more productive, couldn't I?
Yeah. Like thinking of reasons why they won't win the league. That's more productive. Yeah, look, ultimately, just to be serious for a second, nothing changes from one game week to get one game week. But and so what I've said, of course, about the long term, the idea of, like, I think we spoke about on the live on Thursday, right, about what is sustainable and what isn't. That doesn't change. But my God, is it hard to maintain that. And when they just keep winning, and it is, I can't lie, it's getting scarier and scarier. But maybe we'll leave that for today. We did beat Ipswich 1-0. I don't know if you caught the instant reaction. It's a strange one sometimes. I think also actually kind of related to Liverpool as well. It's a strange one when we are in the position that we're in with chasing, to know how to sort of get a sense of how to contextualise those games where it feels like we get over the line, we won, and you and I could sit here and say, well, we won 3 points and move on. I think most Arsenal fans, most fair-minded, let's put it that way, Arsenal fans, accept that, yes, okay, we won, but there were still the issues that we have seen in terms of the volume of chance creation, in terms of getting into dangerous positions, in terms of the finishing, etc., that we've all seen this season. I don't think, for me personally, my doubts weren't allayed by that game. Of course, as I say, we won, so you could just move on from there. But I guess your overall thoughts on the game with that in mind, because I found it a very hard game to get too positive about, which maybe seems unfair, but also we're talking about the same stuff, so it's like it's quite hard for me.
Yeah, I think there's two sides of this. I think there are many aspects that I was actually very happy with in terms of the performance. I think the control that we had, which is something that becomes the norm that we've seen under Mikel, and that's a massive staple. Now you've got Liverpool staples of fast transition-based football when they win the ball back, for example. With Arsenal, you have really good control and not giving away anything whatsoever. Sorry to
just pause you there.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Do you think part of what's going on with our maybe some, okay, I can only speak for me, my concerns and the sort of the fear of Liverpool is around the style as well? That must be another aspect of it.
I think a large portion of this is also down on the fact that people were expecting this to be our year, and it still could be our year, but I think naturally with where we are on the table, and then we're seeing what Liverpool are doing in terms of the chances they're generating when they've established territory, and you're looking at how we are doing it, people are frustrated, and I think that's the big reason for this. I think if we were top and we won like we did on Friday, I don't think many would be looking at the negatives that much, which I get, which I completely get. I think that's the reason why you do see kind of frustration and people getting annoyed by how we are attacking. In games.
Yeah, which is understandable. And also, when you consider as well, on Boxing Day, City drop points, Chelsea drop points, Villa drop points, Spurs drop points, United drop points, you know what I mean? Like when that's happening around. Yeah, and I never want to get too far down the kind of Arsenal isolationism and only focusing on ourselves, because ultimately it was a positive weekend. But yeah, it was a hard one for me to analyse, because I'm sort of sat there going, I don't know what we've learned really from that game.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I kind of, maybe I'm a little bit more positive on this game because I tweeted out and I felt that, I was quite happy with the overall performance because of a lot of things that I saw in terms of, like I said, we didn't give anything away whatsoever. And by the way, I mean, fair play to Ipswich in terms of how they set up. And the way that they did set up is, I would say, the best way to set up to get something against Arsenal. The way that Everton do it, the way that Newcastle do it as well. With that kind of aggressive mid-block and then being comfortable deeper as well. But they've not, every time I've watched Ipswich, they've not played like that at all, and that's fair play. I'm never going to knock a team with an idea that they have and they believe that's the best possible way of achieving a result. I'm never going to knock it, but I just found that quite funny. But I think we won't go too much into the details, but I think the biggest frustration that I have, and I kind of want to look at this towards Mikel in terms of how he answers post-match interviews as well, where I don't think anyone could say that Arsenal didn't deserve to win that game against Ipswich, even if you were so frustrated with the things that you were seeing in the final third. And I think, the territory that we established, the situations that we did create, the Gabriel header, Kai Havertz had a really big chance in the second half as well. There were things that happened in the game that made you think that Arsenal deserved to win the game. But it is kind of similar to the Everton game as well, in which we drew 0-0. And it's kind of it's crazy how, the result massively dictates sometimes how you do feel. There was that same feeling, but we won, so there's a lot of people thinking, we won, so it's okay. And I don't know about you, but with Mikel, with his post-match interviews, in terms of how he assesses the game, I feel he's very statistical in his mindset. Yes. Very statistical, where... And this is where I see both sides of this, where, for example, the Everton game, I know I'm kind of digressing a bit, the Everton game, he felt, looking at that game, post-match says, we did enough to win the game. We deserve to win the game. And from a metric point of view, if you look at the XG, and I think we had like 1.2 or something, Everton had nothing. He's right there. But then from Sean Dyche's point of view, where, I've set my team up to concede that much territory. I'm willing to suffer, and for you to only create that little, even though you created more than us, I feel we deserve the point in that sense. So it's kind of a different way of thinking in terms of how the manager looks at it post-match. Whereas the Crystal Palace game, for example, Palace generated 2 XG, in that game, and we conceded some big moments through our own sloppiness. And Arteta recognised that in his post-match. He said, we conceded too many big moments in that game, and on a different day it could have hurt us, etc. So I find him very statistical, and I can predict what he's going to say post-match. And in the Ipswich game, he said very similar things to what he said in the Everton post-match game as well. Just quickly, in terms of the criticism, and one of the things that I do want to talk about is the fact that my frustration with Arsenal right now is with the territory that we do establish and how much dominance we have, we don't generate enough threat. That's where I'm looking at it. We don't generate more threat than what we should do, and that's the criticism that I have, where Arteta may look at it and think, we created enough to win the game, but I'm thinking to myself, we should be creating more to win the game convincingly, and I did think that we left 2 goals on the pitch in that game against Ipswich, but just generally, that's the way I kind of view Arteta in terms of how he analyses the game post-match immediately.
It is it's very methodical and mathematical. Yeah. And I suppose the old adage is a manager is a kind of a reflection of the team. And I think that is what Arsenal are. We really, this is why I kind of come away from this game going, well, we know we can do all the right things to create the field tilt.
Yeah.
I'm not sat there going, wow, look at the field tilt I might have done in the past. But this new iteration of Arsenal, I suppose, with chasing Liverpool, I'm not looking at the possession. I'm not looking at the final third entries. I'm not, all those things. They're things that have got us here, by the way. And we should absolutely give it credit. And by the way, we shouldn't, I said this on the instant reaction as well, this idea of this platform that we have with Saliba and Gabriel and Raya, obviously, but also the whole team in terms of the unbelievable work we did in the counter press on, when was it, Friday? Like it was incredible what we were doing. The effort, the energy to run back, to get back in shape against Ipswich at home, in a busy sort of festive period. So credit has to go to the platform that we create ourselves, the mathematical aspect of our game. We tick every box. Yeah. We absolutely do in terms of what we do, in terms of getting so much stuff right. in terms of the metrics that come out. And you're absolutely right. I think Mikel comes out after games and goes, for example, he spoke about the West Ham game last year, the one of the Emirates where we lost 2-0. And he said, yeah, but that was the game where we had the most box entries in the final, most box entries or most box touches in the Premier League history or something. Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was for Arsenal or for
I think since
everyone.
Recording, I think it was.
But I think it might be for everyone, not even just Arsenal. The most touches, I could be wrong, but someone check me on this, but the most touches in the box in the Premier League history, or since Opta start recording, and we lost 2-0. And that is, it's kind of like I'm really struggling with this season, as people can probably hear, because all of my feeling up to now with Mikel has been, if you keep every plate spinning, if you make sure that the fitness is, we're doing the right stuff in the fitness, we're doing the right stuff in terms of the controlling the narrative in the media, we're doing the right stuff in training, we're doing the right stuff in terms of nutrition, we're doing the right stuff in terms of progressing the ball, all the stuff we always talk about in terms of coaching, get every throw in right, get every corner right, just control everything, which is basically Mikel's MO, I think, control everything, the result will come. Yeah. That's been my feeling. People who probably listen to people for a long time know that that's what I've felt. And that has got us here, absolutely. My question mark now is, can that get us over the line? Do you need to, and we've sort of touched on it before, but maybe not as much as this, do you need to lean into the chaos a little bit more and be less mathematical? Yeah. And the Crystal Palace game that you mentioned is a perfect example. It's one of those games where actually we gave up a little bit more, but we got more. And I think Ipswich is one of those games where we almost return to pre-Palace.
But that's interesting because, like I said, that Palace game did have a lot of chaos. And we've not spoken much since because I've been away in India. But, before the Palace game, Arsenal was showing they were the antithesis of clinical finishing, cutting edge. Whereas against Palace, we absolutely were. It was arguably our most ruthless performance. But I don't think, I can guarantee you, Mikel did not like that game. He didn't like it because of the territory that we did concede in certain moments and the chances that Palace did generate, down to our own sloppiness, by the way. The big moments that they did create was from our own doing. But that's not something that he likes. Now, and I think that's just how he is. And I do believe with this approach, we can get over the line. I know, obviously, people won't agree to that because of obviously what's happened this season so far, and obviously Arsenal not getting over the line for 2 years now previously, in which they've been battling it out for the title. But I do think that we can get over the line with this approach. But what I will say is, I think the 22-23 season was massive in terms of, you saw a different type of Arsenal in terms of mindset and intent, in which we were very vertical. And we spoke about it when we were doing pods back then, in terms of Arsenal not changing the way they play, irrespective when they're winning, losing or drawing. And there were some really good pieces of data out there which looked at Arsenal's pass accuracy and things like that in terms of the different game states. But we saw problems with being overly vertical in that season at times and the chances that we were conceding. And then last season, we go with a mindset of we're going to be a lot more controlled and we're not going to look to give away the ball centrally, because if you give away the ball centrally, those are areas in which you can be really hurt in transition. And that's where Arsenal have gone. It's a change in mindset from 22-23 all the way to now. Now, I'd argue, for me, people disagree with this, but for me, the best version of Arsenal that we've seen under Arteta was this year, 2024, from January onwards, all the way to the end of the season, 100-point pace. I don't think you can argue with those numbers there. And also, it wasn't boring. Look at the games that we had. Look at the goals we were scoring. It wasn't boring. That is the best version of Arsenal. And that comes with this controlled mindset. But I do think that we've gone a little bit too far towards that end. I really do. And I think there's a really good account, I think Data EPL Analytics, who does some really good stuff, and he showed central progression and also zone 14 touches. Arsenal are right there at the bottom of the table, with a couple of other teams in terms of central progression and in terms of accessing zone 14. If you don't access zone 14 enough, the chances that you generate are not going to be as high, because that is an area in which it causes panic for the opposition. When you access that space, players jump out unnecessarily because everything happens really fast and you can generate really good moments. We don't do that enough, but that's by design. We don't access those spaces enough because we want to go a little bit more around the block because we see it as more of a safe approach. But I think we can move that dial a little bit more towards being a little bit braver. And that is why, for me, and I tweeted that, I think that is why we're not generating more threats. Until we start to be a bit braver, and we'll get onto actually with Miles Lewis-Skelly in terms of what he's offered to the team, in terms of that bravery. But until we start doing that a little bit more, I think you're going to continue to see games in which Arsenal deserve to win. I don't think Mikel is wrong in his assessment of the games, but it's not going to be a case of Arsenal are going to be convincing in their games when they're playing against these sorts of teams. That's what I want to mention a lot. These sorts of teams and how this.
Yeah. So I said post game, do you know, the feeling I miss in football is getting away with it.
Yeah.
Not deserving to win, but winning. That has not happened under Mikel for like 3 years at this point. Like, it just doesn't happen. If we deserve to lose, we lose. And if we deserve to win, we usually win, but sometimes don't. It never happens. We never have the sort of the luck in that sense. Look, there's only so many times we can sort of say basically the same thing. And I was talking to someone actually about this the other day. One of the hardest things about like creating content about Arsenal, especially this kind of content, which is hopefully people agree if they're 16 minutes in, is trying to assess the team at a good level, right? And we've spoken about this with Mikel before, is the problem is kind of staring everyone in the face.
Yeah.
How many times can you repackage the same thing in content? We can talk about players and we can talk about, but we all know that this is the issue. So I don't want to spend too long talking about it. But what I was going to say, the only analogy I'd give, 22-23 was the 20-year-old who's coming out, who's got an earring, who's like, going out every night in Clapham and, is living their life or whatever. The 23-24 season, especially the back end, is like the sort of stable, sensible guy. Still knows how to have fun. Doesn't quite get the job done, but is fun. Feels like we've become a middle-aged man this season. I'm not, no discredit to middle-aged men, but that sense of like the slightly boring, slightly stuck in their ways, slightly, sort of in a rut in that sense. And I just want him to get a motorcycle. That's all he needs. Yeah. Just get a motorcycle. And you'll get over the line. Yeah. You'll be fine.
Do you know what it's
kind of my assessment?
I always look. So I go to the games quite often, right? And that 22-23 season, it's crazy in terms of how it started and how it ended, in terms of how fans approach the games, right? So I remember going to those games early on in the season, and there was such a really good feel factor. Obviously, after we actually had a really good pre-season as well. Don't forget, the Chelsea game which we won 4-0, and signing Jesus Zinchenko and the change in the team dynamics. And that first 19 games, everyone was enjoying it so much because we didn't expect it. We just missed out on top 4 in the previous season. So the expectation and the objective was to get back into the Champions League places. And that's what people were thinking. And that's what I was thinking at the time as well. But then Arsenal go on this run in which they accumulate 50 points after 19 games, and everyone's really happy and everyone's going to the games without feeling any sort of pressure. And I remember in the international break in that season in March, and I went to the game, and it was at home against Leeds, and there was only around about 10 games left. And Man City beat Liverpool 4-1 in the 12:30 kickoff. And that's where people started to feel a little bit of tension, because it's like, wow, we're here now. This is intense.
Yeah, this is what's going on.
It's like, it's like when you go uni, your first year, it's all enjoyment because it doesn't count towards your degree, and you can do whatever you want with reason, obviously, but
within reason, everyone.
Reason. But then, as you get into like second and third year, it actually counts towards your degree now. So you need to buckle up. Yeah. And at that moment, Arsenal had responsibility in that. Right, we need to get this over the line. And in the stands as well, it felt really tense. We won that game 4-1, but I can tell you, from the games in which we played against Liverpool, when we won 3-2 back in, I think it was November at that time, to then playing Leeds in March. And we won 4-1, but I can tell you now the atmosphere wasn't great because there's tension now. And it feels like that now in every game as well that I go to as well, and last season because we have responsibility and fans expect now to get over the line. So I think that's what you see as well.
Yeah. The place we do have a bit of impetus and new impetus in the team is with Miles Lewis-Skelly, who I thought was absolutely terrific against Ipswich. We spoke about it a little bit in the instant reaction in terms of the sort of the personal side of things. Obviously, on the Kind of podcast, we spoke to Miles's mum, and one of the big things I kind of, I hate when people meet or meet someone and they're like, yeah, she was really like this. I actually really know her. I don't know. I met her for an hour and she was lovely. If you're listening, Marcia, you're absolutely lovely. I only met her for a very brief time, but the impression I got was someone incredibly driven, incredibly clear on their principles and their morals, incredibly and just like a lovely person, but just has a very clear direction in life, and is like, I'm doing this, I'm really passionate about this, and that is exactly what I see in Miles's play. And I'm like, I just from that moment I was like, yeah, that's him. Of course it is. If you grow up in that environment, of course you are. It's so driven. He's so patient with his play, and what I mean by that is, I sort of said this, but I think sometimes with young players, you can come into a team and you want to show yourself now. Every action has to go forward. Everything has to be, on the edge of everything. You're coming in as a young winger, and you have to try and take someone on with every action, or you've got to try and score with every touch. Or the other side is you hide. And I think what Miles has is the maturity to go, no, I'm in the middle. I'm going to play my part. And that is actually one of the hardest things to do as a young player. And it's one of the hardest things to do as a young person, I think, is to go in and be like, actually, I don't need to impress everyone from minute one in any environment. I just need to do what I need to do, what is expected of me, and my job. It's actually really hard. I'm sure people can relate to going into the office and thinking, I need to, make sure everyone knows what I'm doing from minute one, or you feel completely overwhelmed. Actually, to be in that middle ground of just like, nope, I deserve to be here. I'm good enough to be here, but I'm not going to have to impose my game in every moment, just in the right moments. That is the thing I really love about him. And he is his game intelligence of when to speed things up, when to drive. It's not just the fact that he has the quality to go through bodies, which is something we spoke about before. It's not the quality in possession, which he has, the bravery in possession. It's also, he'll just give it back to Gabriel sometimes. He'll not show for it sometimes because that's the right thing to do. He'll pull out wide and be the option out wide, not because he expects the ball, but because he needs to create that space inside or whatever it might be. That's the part of his game that is so impressive at his age. And then you look at his quality in possession, and then you look at how he drives with the ball. Then you look at, I think his assessment of situations always feels right. He's so impressive. It's incredible. And actually, just last thing, I think Ethan is maybe a couple of dials closer to I'm going to show you what I can do, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially for playing that position. But that's what I really clock about the difference between the two. I'm like, okay, Miles is playing like he's 27, and Ethan plays like he's probably about 22.
Yeah.
But there is a difference.
It's like Miles will show it when he needs to, isn't it? And he doesn't need to show it in every single touch and action, because he knows with the dominance that we have on the ball, he's going to get opportunities, and it's about picking your moments. And he's not had a single bad performance this season. Not a single bad performance. Every game has been minimum 8 out of 10. He's been that good. And I watched it back, and he was my man of the match. I felt that he was the best player on the pitch. And the thing that you mentioned about going through...
That is mad,
is crazy, isn't it?
I don't disagree. Yeah. That is mad. Just hear that for a second. That is mad.
Exactly. When you sit back and you consider his age, and you consider the fact that, he's coming into a team in a role. And by the way, Calafiori's back. We had left backs, on the bench.
Tierney's on the bench. Kivio's on the bench.
Yeah, and he's managing to keep his place, and that's a testament to the performances that he's had. And I'm happy that Arteta is continuing to persist with him, because he deserves it. And by merit, he's playing really well. And I think for me, we talked about central progression and accessing zone 14. And funnily enough, every single game Miles Lewis-Skelly has played, there's been at least one moment in which he's pressed, he's under pressure, but he evades it, uses his body really well, and he drives out, and he drives in, and he's free. And then there's the space, isn't it? Because when you receive the ball in that space, it's a trigger for the opposition of, that is danger. Essentially, we need to stop that player. But you can't get the ball off him, and he goes through you. And if you go back to the build-up to Saka's goal against Monaco, in which he did that broke the game open. Last week against Palace, he did it, in which he set Ødegaard free. And he did it, there's a nice little compilation going on. He did it a couple of times against Ipswich as well, and that is something that this team needs, and I think that we can talk about the balance overall in terms of the left-hand side, and I think this is again another criticism that I would have, because I don't think Miles Lewis-Skelly and Trossard on that left-hand side is the most balanced. But from an individual point of view, I don't think you can knock his performance and what he's offering to the team. And again, for a player of his age, it's crazy. And what I found really interesting as well, and really good to see, is that there were a couple of times which Delap was trying to get in his face. Calvin Phillips was trying to get in his face. He doesn't budge. He just doesn't. No. He does not budge. No. It's like,
and he's kind of giving it back, but not in a Larry way. He's just like, you don't scare me.
It's kind of like, you know, when you're trying to get a reaction out of someone, you want to feel that they're bothered, but he's not bothered, and that annoys you. It's like
and he's not backing, but he's also not backing down. That's the other thing. He wasn't like when because Calvin Phillips kind of runs into him.
Yeah,
he just stood in his face. He's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
it wasn't going after him, which again is a very natural response, nor shying away. It's that same middle ground, which is just like, I know how good I am. I know I deserve to be here. It's really amazing. I think two things that I want to come to. Firstly, I think that we're going to come later to Martinelli and how that all worked. And Mikel spoke in his post-match about the 12,000 minutes that Saka and Odegaard and White have spent together. I think the one thing as Miles develops in the team, and again, as you mentioned, that the amount of players he's keeping out of the team, would I drop him for next game? Absolutely not. No chance, which is amazing, you know, considering what we signed. And actually, I want to come onto the window in a second. But the dynamic of Miles inside and that slipped ball through the centre-back and the full-back, I think we've seen it twice be I think for a pre-assist. I think that can be his speciality. And sometimes what a young player needs as well, he's got everything, but sometimes what a young player needs is a quality or a ball or a specific thing, you know, whether it's, you know, Vieira's half-space crossing or, you know, Odegaard dropping back or whatever it is, just one thing that no one else in the squad can do. And the weight of pass, the timing of the pass and the execution of the pass, that quality that I've seen time and time again in the youth academy and has translated to the adult game, that really, if he spends some time, I predict that pass could be like the Miles pass. I think it's really exciting. And the other thing I want to say is the comparisons with Timber. Having these two very dually, very aggressive sort of players who enjoy coming off the touchline, coming inside, having that is balance in a sense. And I know we normally talk about balance out wide with the right, you know, the correct footers or whatever. I really like them as a pairing as well, as a sort of pair of. They sort of feel like they're cut from the same cloth, sort of similar vibe, similar style. They sort of drive differently, they take the ball differently, they approach duels, etc. differently. They obviously are different players, but that sort of, again, it's almost less centre-backy fullbacks now and more midfieldy fullbacks. Yeah. And I think with that, if we get the wingers right and if we can get the shape around them right, that is a really great dynamic. And I would, as the dual fullbacks, I really like it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like when people are looking at Calafiori as well, and Calafiori's Timber as being Arsenal's most dynamic fullbacks because of their ability to operate in various different zones, drifting in and out, and the flexibility it gives you. And Miles Lewis-Skelly is actually really interesting because him and Timber are doing very similar things as well in terms of how they carry and how they power through. Like there was that moment in which Timber receives it, and Rice and Havertz pull the two central midfielders wide, and Timber then drives through and he gets his shot off. Yep. And I want to see more of that. You know, and sometimes people think, you know, in that moment, Timber gets the shot off and, you know, he maybe could have passed it. But no, we should be looking at these situations which get shots off. And that's, we'll probably get into it, that's something that Liverpool do really well at. You know, in terms of when they do find spaces in the final third, they'll look to get shots off quickly. But yeah, I think we're blessed with very, very good fullbacks. It's just a shame that we've not been able to have the opportunity to pick and choose in different games because we have been hampered with a lot of injuries. And I do want to talk about that slightly in this podcast as well. It's not an excuse, but this season has been tough. It has been tough in terms of how we've had to navigate through different games with the players that we've not been able to choose. And but yeah, I think we've got so many good options there. And again, credit to Miles because there's a lot of competition there, and he's managing to keep them out. So
yeah. It's really impressive. And I want to come onto the window a little bit later about Calafiori and discuss that. You want to talk a little bit about the diamond against Ipswich and also the sort of the diamond I guess we've been seeing recently. I think, really, the game's slightly in the back mirror now. We're starting to look forward towards Brentford. I think the real shame for me maybe was the lack of carry, especially when you do have players like Rice and Miles and Timber. At some point, that has to be instruction. I think, especially when you have those players deep or in that sort of diamond shape or you know wherever they are in relation to the ball. I think there could have been more carry, especially against Ipswich, especially in the shape that they had, which I felt was quite shallow but also quite wide. Yeah. That's a space where you can set yourself and you can drive through teams. But it's actually something I've felt for a while. I was looking back through my old tweets for I can't remember what player it was. Oh, it was the I do like a halftime review, and a lot of my halftime reviews are where's the carry, and I think it's something I really want in this team. And I it's not just carrying for the sake of it, and players carry differently, but it's carrying to attract and carrying to break blocks a little bit. And I really felt this was one of the games where I was really looking for that. But yeah, I mean, firstly, obviously how you feel about that, but also I think you wanted to talk a little bit about the diamond and how it's working.
Yeah, I think we've started to see this over the past couple of games. I'd say the Palace second half in the Cup, in which we started to see it again, and then against Palace the previous week, and now Ipswich. And I think for me, the diamond only tends to take shape when we're in the middle third and into the final third, because that's when we've got the team set and they're looking to defend a little bit deeper. And I think it's been more down to how the opposition is set up, because we played Palace and Ipswich and both teams had deployed a back five. So with a diamond, that 3-diamond-3, effectively it's kind of like 3-1-6, and we're looking to kind of push 6 players across the last line because it can overload the opposition's back five. And we do this a lot against back five systems. The only difference now with the diamond is that when we're playing through the right hand side and Odegaard drops wide, Havertz, as that nominal left centre mid, will drift over and he'll play off the striker. That's the difference. It's just who's occupying what space. So, in essence, we're not really seeing a lot different in terms of how we get...
And sorry to cut you off, but I think Odegaard looked better when he did that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we've all seen that interview that Declan Rice gave to The Athletic in terms of Mikel always wants his team to play with good height. So... Just keep just remember that quote in terms of playing with good height, and think of Odegaard stepping outside of the block, and that means that space, that half space, is now open. But it's Havertz now coming into that space as opposed to the winger coming inside, or our number 6, Declan Rice, in this case, coming into that space. It's just a different player. That is the only major difference that you're seeing in possession. We're still attacking with 6 players, in these scenarios. And this is why I disagree when people are saying, Arteta needs to commit more bodies forward. We are committing players forward. We commit a lot of players forward. It's just the mindset and the approach of being braver with the ball. That's the difference. And that's where, your frustration comes into carrying the ball more. Like, I remember in the second half when Declan Rice had it, and I don't know if you remember it, but he carried through and he won the foul just before for the penalty box, and we won the free kick. So more things like that. But yeah, the diamond, I think, has been more down to the teams that we've played and how they've set up. And actually, going against Brentford midweek, they do play with a back five system when they're defending a bit deeper.
Yeah, so we'll probably see it again.
So we'll probably see it again, in terms of how we use Havertz. So, I do think Declan Rice is very important in this iteration in terms of his role as number 6. But, yeah.
That was where I was going next. Yeah, you read my mind. I think we sort of spoke about Rice. And it is interesting. He gets asked about it quite a bit now.
Yeah.
And he always says, I'm happy to learn 8, I'm enjoying it and whatever, but he always does answer, I think I'm a 6. And I think you can see that. I mean, we've obviously spoken before about it, and we've spoken time and time again about wanting him deeper. But I think in these sorts of games, there was obviously a comp that came out of him. It's the ability to, for me, arrive rather than be there already for Rice. I think, and what I mean by that is, if you watch a lot of the things he's involved in off the ball, on the ball, I think he's great. He can play those passes. He may be a little bit angle biased to the right, but when you have Saka and when that's great for us. I like that ability to switch. We're not even going to go near the narrative that he doesn't pass the ball forward. It's just not true. Like, it's not even worth a conversation. It's just not true. What I like from him being deeper is he can arrive off the ball. And he can arrive in spaces either when there's a bit of space in front of the defence to maybe play a ball in or to have a shot, but also when a ball is loose, he's running onto it. I think sometimes as an 8, he's in the situation, and one of his best qualities is that ability to slow himself and to how he kind of approaches duels. If you get Rice in a foot race against someone, or sort of I don't know, the ball's ricocheted away, he will get his body in front of it. He's so good at it. Or if the ball's coming towards him, to time the tackle, he's so good at that. The times when you can maybe deal with him out of possession, like that's his world-class quality to me. When the ball's kind of loose, who's going to pick it up? The second ball, or I don't know, the ball's ricocheted out, who can get the body in front of it, whatever. That's what I think of. He's brilliant. What he doesn't always manage, I think, sometimes, is when someone's got past him, is carrying past him, he has to sort of keep up. You remember Morgan Rogers? There was a couple of moments where, because he's stationary and it's from a standing start, and he has to almost track back behind himself, again, he's still brilliant, but that's probably one of the places that you can deal with him a little bit out of possession. I just love him as a 6 in so many different ways. I understand why Mikel uses him as an 8. I really do. The counter-pressing stuff, I get. He wants him in those positions because he's very quick to the ball, and actually you can use some of the quality that I was talking about there, but not as much, and it's more angle-biased from the left. And I get it. You want the runner, you want the shuttler, you want the player who can arrive in the box and maybe not with the necessarily as much goal threat, but the quality to arrive there and the engine to arrive there. I get it as a manager. If you're trying to keep a team, penned in, you want Rice as high as you possibly can. He's your horse, as people have. I think even Saka referred to him as a horse, right? I get that, but when you watch a performance like that, I just go, oh, come on.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you saw it, but I don't know. I think it might have been post-match Palace actually, or maybe it was his pre-presser for Ipswich, and I think it was a woman journalist, and she asked him about the Declan Rice 8 versus 6 conversation.
A woman journalist? Do they exist?
She's actually really good. I can't remember what her name is as well. She always asks really interesting questions. And also, by the way, Arteta loves the tactical questions. Like, you can see, he actually gives lots of information. But
just for the avoidance of doubt, that was a joke that he said woman. that was a joke for anyone wondering. So carry on.
but he loves getting into those tactical questions, and he spoke about it. And there's a lot to take in, but what he mentioned quite a few times was the reason why he's used Rice as a number 8 and a number 6 is because of the nature of how the squad has been built. He needs to be versatile because of the options that we have. And that immediately screams in my head, well, Jorginho, Thomas Partey. But also Jorginho, Thomas Partey being in the squad. That has meant that Declan Rice has had to play games as a number 8. And I do agree with his comments towards the end in which he said, you can't confine Declan Rice into a box and allow him to just play in one role, one position. And I've never had an issue in terms of Rice playing as a number 8 or as a number 6. My issue is his predominant minutes. I do believe there are certain games which him as a number 8 works really well, even in possession. Like, for example, when he came on against Palace last week, that game was perfect for Rice as a number 8 because Palace were pressing high, they were leaving space in behind, and Rice has said it himself as well. He likes to play as a number 8 when the game is free and it's open and he can carry the ball, and that's where you see his qualities. But when a team is set in a block in which you're not going to get that many touches when you're inside the block, I just feel it's counterintuitive to use him in that role. I get it with the out of possession stuff, and that's why I think certain games he is good as a number 8, because when you're looking to entice teams to play short and you've got someone like Rice who can mark 2 players and he can step in because, we talk about it, he makes 50-50s turn into 80-20s in his favour because of his frame. But for me, predominantly, he is a number 6, and I think it's very interesting in terms of how there is a large section of fans who disagree with this because they don't believe he does pass the ball forward, he doesn't break lines, which I disagree with. What I think it's more down on Declan Rice, how he turns when he's back to goal and he's pressed. Like, if he's receiving the ball from David Raya and someone is pressing him on his back, he's not necessarily going to turn and then drive forward and face play. Whereas Thomas Partey is more willing to kind of bait the press. He's going to pass it to the centre-back, play a wall pass, but instead he turns, then he faces play, and then he plays that pass. I think that's the difference in terms of how the players turn and how they kind of, what they do when they're receiving the ball in that situation. But in terms of playing the ball forward, I think it's a subconscious bias that people have when it comes to Rice as number 6 in terms of why they don't like him. Like, I think he needs to play like 500 line breakers for it to be a performance in this role. When we ignore all the other things that he does really well in terms of the control he gives you, the dual winning ability, the protection in front of the centre backs. And by the way, playing as a number 6 in our system, it's not someone who just sits back. You look at Rice, he's always looking to get on the ball inside the block as well and play high. That's how we play, and there was also an opportunity where you saw him showcase his ball striking as well in that first half, where we pushed that back line deeper. The space is just outside the edge of the box, and it's a really good strike. It's unlucky. So you are able to see a lot of the positive side of Declan Rice in the final third in this role as well. And I just think this is where he's maximised. And I think that I think Busquets, for me, the best holding midfielder I've ever seen in my lifetime, has painted this picture that everyone needs to be like him. They need to be just as good as he is on the ball. When a number 6 that complete is very rare to find, and you've also got to appreciate the other things that Declan Rice does really well, whilst also recognising that he does play the ball forward. And he said it in an interview as well with Athletic. He actually knows this narrative as well. He said in that interview with the Athletic,
he said it.
People think I don't play these passes, but I love playing these passes, he says as well. So, yeah.
I haven't quite figured out how to articulate it, but it's like, it's something for some. So I always use this about Ben White. I think sometimes Ben White as a right back goes underrated because he's not far enough away from a traditional right back for people to be like, oh, he's not a traditional right back, but he's also not a traditional right back. So people don't quite know how to judge him. Yeah. And it's similar with Rice in the sense that he's not Busquets in that metronomic playmaker style, but he's also not. He's not just a destroyer.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So it's like hard to know exactly how to judge him. And I think sometimes you almost want an easier. People can kind of hold in their minds like, oh, I know what a false 9 is, and I know what a proper number 9 is, right? So I can hold those, so I can judge a Firmino and I can judge a Luis Suarez. I know what those two different things are, right? But if someone was in the middle, it's like, well, you're not either, so you're not good. So it's not fair.
It's not
because
also,
you can.
Yeah. But also with Declan Rice, he is the best out of possession midfielder in the world. He is. That is his quality. That is his staple quality, and nobody beats him in that regard for me. Where people will beat him is on the ball in certain aspects, as a number 6, but he's not bad at it. In fact, he's good at it, So if you've got someone who is the best in the world at something, but then he's also really good at something else, but he may not be better than the top percentile in that aspect, that is more than good enough for any team, because there is no number 6 who is the best in the world at every single detail. Declan Rice is better than Rodri out of possession. He is, but Rodri is better on the ball in terms of decision making and in terms of what passes to play. But
I mean, this is a wider thing, isn't it? I saw I was having a conversation with someone on you know what website, so he was like, I was talking about Havertz, and the guy was like, since when do we judge players off the ball, Lamau? And I was like, you mean the thing they spend 95% of the game doing? Seems fairly important to me, that part of the game. Like but it is that bias, and I get it. And I think sometimes this is a wider conversation, but I think sometimes with narratives around Arsenal, ultimately I don't watch Spurs. Particular, I'll watch their games if they're on a Super Sunday, and their games against us, or maybe I might catch a bit of a Europa League game or something. So I don't know every single narrative going on at Spurs. So if I watch a player, I won't say I know more than say Ben Bowman, who's a great Spurs creator as well. So I don't know. So when people talk about us from an external perspective, I'm a bit like, well, you just don't watch enough of our games, and that's kind of fine. Yeah. I think the Rice one has come from England though a little bit, which also isn't fair, but that's a different conversation. We. Also, maybe before we can, I want to come to a couple more things before we get onto questions. We saw Martinelli on the right for the first time. I've put this section as surviving without Saka. It was. I can't lie. When that picture came out of him in the hospital bed, I was like.
I mean, I told you. I've said to you already in that. I'm a very confident and optimistic person. I feel like I have my reasons for it, especially with Arsenal, what we've seen under Mikel. But this news, it's. I said it on TCB Live. Bukayo Saka to Arsenal is Mohamed Salah to Liverpool, is Erling Haaland to Man City. So we before ball was kicked, or before this injury was ever a thing, if I asked you a player who you wouldn't want to get injured for a prolonged period of time, it'd be Saka, wouldn't it?
It would be a toss-up between two players, Martin Odegaard and Bukayo Saka.
And both of them we've lost for a significant amount of time this season. I mean, I've not recovered from this. I don't think I will recover from this. It's about mitigating it, and ultimately we can't completely mitigate it because of the caliber of player that we're going to be missing, and that is the reality of it. It sucks. It really does. And
we did see Martinelli though.
Yep.
What did you make of that performance?
Yeah, so I think people know I'm quite big on Martinelli playing on the right hand side because I think it simplifies his game. I didn't think he had the best performance there. I think he's had some really good showings in that role. You know, I've mentioned it on TCP Live in terms of when we've seen him in that role previously. It's not a massive sample size, but he has shown his qualities there because like I said, it simplifies it for him. And I thought he did really well against Palace as well when he moved over to that side when Saka sustained the injury. But I found it interesting, and we'll probably get into it in terms of Arteta's comments post-match, in which he said, we can't play the same way without Bukayo. We can try and play the same way, but we'll inevitably be worse. So we need to try something different. And actually, in the first half, I felt we were trying to play like we had Saka, right wing. And he even mentioned it in that interview as well. He said second half we changed a few things. But in the first half, like for example, you mentioned it briefly, Declan Rice receiving it and then switching it out wide to Martinelli. And that happened a couple of times. And Martinelli's 1v1. But it's a different player in a different environment there. And he's only really going to go on the outside. Whereas, and Arteta mentioned it as well, he said that isolating Martinelli on the right-hand side in particular, him being right-footed, it's not going. He's going to suffer. That's what he mentioned. Whereas Bukayo Saka in that situation, he's going to be able to go on the outside, but also you've got players hovering around the back post, ready for that cross to come in, because that is a massive part in terms of the way that we play. You're not going to be able to do that with Martinelli. So I saw that and thought, oh, this is nice. But then I'm thinking, oh, well, it's not going to be the same outcome that you're going to see. But in the second half, what he did do, he changed it a lot in terms of 22-23, we saw Jesus drifting out wide a lot, and there was a lot of rotation happening on the left-hand side. And in that second half, and I know obviously people may not remember it, but we saw a lot of rotation on the right-hand side. Martinelli was coming a lot more inside. Timber was going more on the outside. He wasn't overlapping from late. That's something that Ben White does really well, but he was pulling wider. It allowed Martinelli to come more inside. Havertz was drifting over, which is doing. So we were looking to have a lot more combinational play there, whereas something you don't necessarily always see at Bukayo, because Bukayo is able to hold the flank down on his own, and then you have someone running, on the outside late, what Ben White does, etc. So we tried to change a few things. Yeah. I thought in the first half we tried to do things in similar fashion to what we've been doing with Saka for many times, but it didn't necessarily work. And the second half, I don't think it worked really well, but it's something that is going to take time as well, because...
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a few iterations. I'll be so real, like, I don't know what the answer is. I think we'll know it when we see it. It's going to depend on the game, and obviously depend on the opposition. But I think this idea that, the answer is definitely this. You kind of need to see it in practice a little bit. Like, unfortunately, we can sit here and theorize and say, okay, well, if Jesus can be a bit more retention-y and we can get this player, like, you need to see it. And I think, and actually, Mikel said it about Miles. Like, everything's great in theory. You can sit here and say, well, if you just did this, Mikel, and then you watch it, and then you go, oh, okay, actually, this isn't right for whatever reason. It's a lot easier in theory. I think the Martinelli thing works in theory. We need to give it more time and space. When I watched it, I just didn't get a good feel. I didn't sit there and go, okay, if he had an overlap, or if I felt he had more space in the pocket, or if he approached the duel slightly differently. It just felt like the angles were wrong. Yeah. It just looked like a player who didn't suit being on that side. Does he suit being on the left? Different conversation, but maybe more certainly than the right. And just that ability, if you as a fullback can face him up and show him inside, and sort of, get your body in that position, it's going to be very hard for him to do exactly what Saka does. Not that we're expecting him to do that, but yeah, I suppose my overall feeling on it is just that I don't know what that is yet. I don't know what we should be doing. Maybe I want to see Jesus. Yeah. I want to see Trossard maybe over there, but I don't know. Yeah. I think it's too early for me.
I think we saw quite a lot in the second half, Jesus pulling wide right a lot. But again, there wasn't a lot of quality there.
But as that like reliable outball, is that Jesus role? That's a different conversation.
But this I don't think, like you said, I don't think anyone can be sure on the solution here. Because like you say, it is by theory. Like, for example, a really good thing to kind of counter theory is Ødegaard and Saka's relationship, right? Which is fantastic. But in theory, you wouldn't think it's particularly fantastic because of how both are left footers, both like to cut inside. Ødegaard's not very good on the outside, overlapping Saka if those two are just working together as a unit.
Both want to be in the pocket.
But, as Mikel mentioned, those two, Ben White, they've played a billion minutes together, and they've been able to develop that relationship. So, and I think Mikel's massive on relationships and continuity. And funnily enough, that is something we've not seen this season as well.
It's huge. And I think I've said this to you before. I think like and I've said this to George before. Like, so much when you view football through a screen, a lot of football can end up being almost like a PlayStation game.
Yeah.
Like, well, if we just deployed this person who has these unique characteristics next to this person, that would definitely work. For example, George has this thing about, pairing a high touch player with a low touch winger, or whatever it might be, and I completely agree with that theory, but I sometimes wonder, when you just put that on the pitch, it just doesn't work. Sometimes, just because they just don't understand each other. And you as you mentioned with Odegaard and Saka, they know each other's runs, and I don't think that's all. I think there is obviously an element of that, which is they just played enough time together. But there is an element that's just natural as well.
Yeah.
They naturally understand each other in the same way that you naturally, with anyone at work, you just naturally connect and bond with certain people, and you don't with others. I'm sure you have people at your work, you're just like, for whatever reason, we just don't get on.
Even though you think you would get on, but you don't.
Yeah, on paper we absolutely would, but we have all the same interests or whatever, but we just don't. So yeah, it's a funny thing. I suppose my kind of overall feeling on that situation is I don't want to go too early and be like, this is definitely what it is. I'm curious to see Jesus. I'm curious to see Kai there, to be honest, a little bit more. I think White's absence, actually we're going to come on to it a little bit later, but maybe let's talk about it now. I think White's absence as a tactical cog on that side, being the overlap, is a big thing, to be honest. I'm worried about Timber's misuse. As I sit here today, I don't know how that right-hand side plays out. And I suppose that's natural, considering how big Saka's been.
And then doesn't that kind of dent the confidence on the bigger picture of the outcome of this season.
Yeah.
And this is where I stand. I've been, I've said I like Martinelli on the right wing. I'd like to see him get more minutes there. But the reality is, and I've said it, the reality is that this is a drop off irrespective of what solution you go for. And then that for me is a worry because of where we are right now and where Liverpool are. I know I'm kind of moving to the bigger picture, but that is what it is, and that's why. If you'd ask me now, I've always felt with Bukayo in the team, we can go and still win this. And people will still think, we're crazy to think that because of what Liverpool are doing, winning 5-0 today. But I stand by that because of the quality that he has. But you take him out of that team and you look at the options that we have, but also just in general, you're taking a top 2 right winger out of the team. I don't, there's no evidence there in front of me to be confident now. Because we are in uncharted territory. He's missed, I think, 5 Premier League games over the past 3 seasons. So,
my position is it's possible.
It's possible, yeah.
But that, ... It's like it's possible. But I think so many things would have to fall into place for us.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
for it to be okay. And I think this is just finishing up on that sort of the right side conversation. Something has to click very quickly, and whether that might be Sterling, that might be whatever, but we also probably, sometimes I think in these sort of absences, maybe we saw with Odegaard, we sort of had a bit of a run of something working with Kai and Trossard, right? But sometimes, I think, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We're going to see a version of it that might be all right and be like, well, it's not perfect because it's not Saka, so let's rip it up. But actually, maybe sometimes it's like, no, that's working enough. Do you know what I mean? It's working enough that Timber and Sterling are, they're enough on that side.
We've mentioned this a lot about, we're talking about, we need to kind of make sure that right-hand side's stable. But it gives us a lot of motivation now to pursue the left-hand side more and funnel attacks more towards that side and try and get that right. Try and get that right consistently. Sure. We've seen it in spells this season, but we've not seen it consistently. So we can look at this injury, if ever there's a positive out of it, even though there's not, but a positive could be in that, okay, we focus more on the left-hand side now and we look to try and make things work there because we have all of our left-hand side options available now. They're all there for now. So let's try and make that work at least and to try and carry through the right-hand side. So there's different ways you can look at it. But ultimately, it is a drop-off. It's just,
unfortunately so. Can't put any copium on that. Before we move to the questions, I look back on the summer window now, and it's very easy in hindsight. We're 2 days away as we sit here from the January window opening. Do you think we need an attacking signing? We won't go over that again. But looking back on the summer window, how do you reflect on it now? Because if I zoom out a little bit, a football team had just gone and there was 2 points between them and the title winners. They then go out and sign a cup-tied goalkeeper, a being polite, undercooked 30-year-old winger, a player who unfortunately got injured, but probably hasn't had the impact. And I see Marino's value. What he is, as I always said, he's a £30 million player. He's going to help us in certain areas, and he already has. I think his adaptation has been a bit slow. I don't think he's shown his top level. Yeah. But even at Marino's absolute peak, I was never expecting him to come in and be Musiala. Do you know what I mean? Like that was never fair. He's going to help us in certain areas. I said in my initial assessment of him on my channel on Different Knock, like, this is a great player, a really great player, and I stand by that. But if you're thinking he's going to be Musiala, that's not who he is. He's £30 million. And then Calafiori, who has been brilliant, but also has been struggling with injuries. I believe in the talents of Calafiori and Marino. But in terms of impact straight away, minute one, for a team that missed out on the title by 2 points, of course, things have happened, and it's unfair to judge previous things by information you have now. But it's just starting to look worse and worse, that window. And I'm not saying it was a total disaster, because I think we have signed some good players. But the more I think back on it, I just think there was so much more to get out of that summer, man. So much more. Yeah,
it depends on what your interpretation of disaster is. If you think that, it's now or never to win the title this season, and there's no other chances, then yeah, it's a disaster. But I don't sit in that camp. But I think, for me, it's the attacking signing that is making us feel how we are. If that attacking signing was someone who was going to be able to give an impact straight away, and we saw him more, I think we'd be thinking about it differently. But unfortunately, with how it's occurred with Sterling, it's led a lot of frustration, especially when you look at it now and our attacking options. It's quite sad. It's quite sad when you just look at it on paper. Yep. And that's the frustration, because
the bench visits, which was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going
19 left backs.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and completely lie. I was quite encouraged with the Sterling loan on deadline day, because I felt he could have an impact. Now, in my defense, I'd say we've not seen him enough, but then there could be a wider issue here of Sterling not doing enough off the pitch, and in training, which then in itself makes the deal a disaster, doesn't it? In isolation.
And it goes back to what we were just saying about theory, mate. Like, in theory, the Sterling signing isn't this disaster that some people were painting it out to be, and I'm sure those people will now say, "See, I told you so." No, in theory, this makes sense. It's a dry loan. The wages make sense. His Premier League experience. He's going to come in and have an immediate impact. That was the theory.
Yeah. I mean, financially, it can never be a disaster, because we don't need to commit to anything, and the deal in that sense was very favourable for us, and that was a large reason why I was happy with it. And I actually felt with Sterling's qualities, there are things that he has that this team lacks, but unfortunately, we've not been able to see it for a number of different reasons. Some that we can't explain because we've not seen him on the pitch, and others in which we've seen him on the pitch and he's kind of flattered to deceive. But yeah, I think when you put it like that, it is quite sad. I will say, though, to play devil's advocate here, right? And I kind of see this side as well. And I think the board are getting a lot of stick here. KSC are getting a lot of stick now.
Bold.
and obviously Arsenal's net spend was, I think it was positive net spend. And that is what people are using as way of, Arsenal should have spent more money, and they should have backed Mikel more. But what about, let's say, what people say, and I kind of hear this as well, over the past couple of seasons, I mean, you go all the way back to COVID, in which, financially that impacted Arsenal the most in terms of revenue from the lack of match-going fans, because obviously games were played behind closed doors, and also just allowing players to leave for free because we weren't proactive with our contracts. And that meant that we spent a lot of money, in the past couple of seasons before this summer window, and this window was the one in which we need to start recruit more internally. And that maybe was the argument with the board of saying, okay, we need to see more. We need to see more signs of this team returning investment. And that's where you saw the sale of Smith Rowe, you saw the sale of Eddie Nketiah. And that could be their arguments for that. And I kind of get that as well, because when you look at those past couple of seasons, they can't keep pumping money.
It has to be sustainable at some point.
And this is where I kind of hear that. Now, again, the argument is what you just said there. Mikel showed everything last season. We were the finest of margins away from winning the league. If Heung-min Son scores that chance, we could be thinking about it completely differently. If Chris Wood scores from about 1 centimetre off the goal line, and by the way, who had the best conversion rate out of any forward last season, we could be talking about this differently. So that's the argument people, like for example, George is saying, and I can hear that as well. But I also do hear the other side of it as well, in which, the squad does need to generate money as well, and it needs to raise funds in order for you to then spend that money. So...
Yeah, and as you say, there's a world we sit here either as winners of last season or as Liverpool maybe don't get off to the same start with Slot, and they have a couple of poor results and we're top, and what are we 8 points ahead of City or whatever. So it's we're judging it by results, but unfortunately it is results based analysis a little bit. But unfortunately, in the end, you have to do a little bit of that at some point, and I think. Yeah, on the sustainability thing about KSC, actually, we got some questions about it, so maybe we should move on to that. But I think you always need to look at your issues first, and I just felt as though these issues. I mean, how long have me, you, George, whatever, been speaking about the issues that we've tried to avoid all podcasts, but in terms of the attacking issues that we have, right? Like that everyone listening could give you some version of basically the same answer. I would say almost every football fan could give you those answers. We knew that in the summer.
Yeah.
And that's where I go, unfortunately, while I hear all the sustainability things and I hear whatever, if you don't address your issues and you're opening yourself up to that kind of criticism, when the issue is so obvious. If they went out and did that and then we fell behind, okay, I'm not looking at the board. I'm not looking at the board. I'm not looking at the map. I'm saying what's going on with the players, whatever, maybe the tactics, whatever. But you're not looking at the sort of the overall strategy. But when the issue is so obvious and it's now coming back to bite us, that is when you start to look up and go, okay, come on.
Because
you knew this was going to happen.
Because I don't agree with this idea that Mikel did not want forward signings. That's absolute nonsense. Of course he wants it. He's been talking about box efficiency. He's been talking about generating more special. Yeah, I mean exactly. The proof is there in the pudding. But I do hear the sustainability argument. But what I will say, coming into January now, and with the Bukayo Saka injury.
Yeah.
I mean, we were already an attacker light. I've always felt that. But now we absolutely must do something, and that this is where I'd completely hear the frustrations if Arsenal didn't do anything, with the situation we're in right now. And like I said, you look at our attacking options and you just look at it on paper and you compare it to other teams in the league as well. It is quite sad without a Saka. Yeah, it is quite sad.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Let's come on to the questions. Thank you so much for being here. If you're still with us, make sure if you're listening to us on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, leave a review for us. That would be lovely. Thank you so much. And make sure you subscribe as well. If you want your question to be more likely to be read out, but also to interact with us guys, because we're always on there, get on the Discord, which you can access by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. We'll go to the Discord first, as always. All of them are about, are we going to make signings? What should we do with KSC? But I'll come to this one from R, who says, would any of you want a change in ownership if we were not to properly invest in January? Does it show a lack of desire to actually want to win and not just secure top 4 or UCL football? While it would be incredibly frustrating not to do that, and it would be, I think, foolish in terms of our short-term goals, unfortunately, I can see the Cronkies waiting till the summer because it's more prudent and more sustainable. And actually, long-term in a business, they have been making the right decisions, the right sustainable decisions. If you look at our, all the trends that we always talk about, the commercial revenues, the stability at the club, the lack of staff turnover, we are very stable. We're very well run. If you were to, I always say this about Mikel, but imagine about KSC, draw up a list of all the things you think they're responsible for. They're across it mostly. John, my sister sent me something the other day. She works in sustainability. Arsenal are proper pioneers in the sustainability field of things. So we focus on the football, but obviously they have a wider representative representational, I guess, responsibility with Arsenal. And in so many areas, I know people won't care about whether we're sustainable and going to net zero, but if you think about what an owner should be doing, I obviously want them to invest, but long term they are brilliant owners, and they have been brilliant owners since they came in. They've provided the pretty much everything we've needed. They've spent hundreds of millions of pounds on players.
Yes.
They've given us what we've needed. They've invested, and at some point, if you imagine you owned Arsenal Football Club, you would say, I'm happy to invest. Now I have full ownership, but at some point I need to see results from that. And so for me, no. It would be a blot on the copybook, but long term, I can see why they would.
It's one of those ones. It's a red mark that you'd have under their name since they've gained full ownership back in 2018.
Yeah.
But on the wider picture, in terms of the infrastructure changes that we've seen to the academy, through, like you say, commercially, and also the support that we've had during the COVID times, and also obviously, unfortunately, having to let big players go for nothing. They've done massive things for us in terms of where we are right now. So for me to then, and again, let's say the summer window, we're really frustrated with not signing a proper attacking forward, and then we now look at January and we look at these two windows as failures. I think in the general picture since 2018, they've been big successes. Yeah. So I can't look at two windows and say, well, that's because I think you have to judge them from 2018 personally when they gained full ownership. I know obviously as fans we're emotional, and before they gained full ownership there was a lot of turbulence and people not happy with what they were doing. But at the same time, from a business point of view, I can understand why they weren't investing when they weren't full owners, didn't gain full ownership. So I
why would you?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you? If you owned a cafe, why would you replace all the tables and chairs and do it up when you don't own it? You're not going to benefit from it.
But it is a red mark. I'd be really frustrated if nothing happened because we need it. In moments like this, when your team is struggling and you as an owner can do something that can help, and that can't be, because ultimately, Alex, like we talk about tactics and systems and everything, etc. Quality dictates outcomes. Always. Player quality will always be the driver. Tactics will allow players to be platformed and for them to shine, but ultimately, without the quality of that player, they're never going to be able to succeed. It's like what we spoke about in TCB Live in terms of those managers, for the Southamptons, the Ipswiches, the McKennas, etc. They are playing a certain brand of football, all of them, that fits players of higher quality, and they are doing that because it allows their CV to be good as well, as we've seen with Vincent Kompany. But you're not seeing the results and you're not seeing them fight the top teams because it's capped by player quality. So it's the same here. Yeah. We've lost a player of Bukayo Saka's quality. We need to have something that is going to give us a bit of a boost. So
yeah. So I completely agree. I basically think I wouldn't blame them if they, as long as they did something in the summer. I understand it from a business perspective. From a sporting perspective, it's incredibly annoying. But I do get it from a business perspective, and therefore, when I'm judging an owner, not what we're doing on the field, because also there's things that we've done to ourselves this season that has nothing to do with the Cronkies that have had a massive impact. So, but it's always about apportioning blame and knowing where to put it. Of course, it would be frustrating, and they need to fix the issue that they didn't. But I mean everyone at the club, including the owners. Everyone needs to fix the issue that we didn't fix in the summer. But yeah, I think you have to take a longer term picture when looking at owners. Let's come to this one on the Discord. We've kind of
looking at questions, and a lot of them, it's just
it's just. Is it over? Seeing as we've lost Saka for a long time, is it safe to say that the league, this is from NSW, safe to say that the league is out of our reach, judging by the form and point accumulation of Liverpool and our shyness in front of goal? I mean, I don't want to just go over basically what we've said already, but it's very hard from this point. If we invest, if Liverpool have a drop-off, which I do believe they will, but then if we're able to take advantage of that, which is the bigger question for me. The bigger question, as I've discussed before, is not will Liverpool drop off, because at some point, unless you think Salah's going to get 80 GA, in which case fair enough, I think that's going to drop off at some point. But then it's a question of whether we can punish it, and I think that's the big thing. There's a world we do it, of course.
Yeah,
but that's.
I mean, the frustration is we've already had a couple of chances recently, in which they dropped points against Fulham, they dropped points against Newcastle, and we unfortunately dropped points at the same time as well. So that's the frustration as well. We could be sitting here with a little bit more confidence, even with Bukayo Saka out injured, had we have capitalised in those games, because obviously the deficit is smaller, and then you're going into the next run of games in which an injury to Salah, an injury to Van Dijk or something like that happens, and then it kind of changes the picture. But the unfortunate thing for us is the fact that we're already at a deficit, so that's the problem. But football's funny, football's strange. I'd never say lose your confidence, because deep inside I'll always have confidence, but I think it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really sad thinking about it.
Nothing's bad. But things change so quickly. Yeah, this is the thing. It's like we could sit here in 2 weeks' time, and the problem is you keep saying this, and it just keeps not happening. But it's still true. There's still however many game weeks to go. We could sit here after 2 Liverpool losses and 2 Arsenal wins, and we're having a very different conversation. So things can change, but we just need to focus on things we can control. Yeah. And that's why I know I'm maybe digressing slightly, but do you think we've been we've had really hard luck though this season? Because I do think we've had that. We spoke about we spoke about obviously the issues with Mikel in certain games, right? And I could point to the Newcastle game in terms of our approach. I could point to the Everton game, which we didn't generate enough threat, etc. But the driver has been injuries. It has been like surely we can consider that. And I know the first comments will be like, oh, Alex Rohan making excuses, etc., etc. But it has been hard. It's not. And the thing is, I always say, yes, everyone gets injuries, but Salah's not been injured. Van Dijk's not been injured. Yeah. That's what it is. It's like the most. If your most important players are injured or not on the pitch because they're sent off, it's like just what can you do? Literally, what can you do? It's like it is that basic sometimes. And yeah. Let's finish with this question from Ivan, who says, "Would you recall Fabio Vieira from his loan at Porto before signing a forward, or wait until deadline day to do it as an emergency option if we don't get who we want?" If our only forward signing is a recall for Fabio, because we can't even recall Reece because he's injured.
Yeah.
Is a recall for Fabio Vieira? Where's your head going to be? Zooming out, like KSE are good owners, but just in this moment,
head will be on Mars, mate. Honestly,
yeah.
But I'll tell you what. Right. So I like Fabio Vieira a lot, and I've mentioned we've spoke about it in previous pods. I know you're not overly keen on him, and I think you have your reasons for that as well. You mentioned it because actually, when we talk about theory, right? A lot of Fabio Vieira is by theory. Although I think that theory can be put into practice had we have used him more, and that's a different conversation. But where I don't like this, and if this is true, is the fact that Mikel has indirectly mentioned how Ethan Nwaneri was a massive reason as to why we've loaned out Fabio Vieira. So if you're bringing him back, it's for reasons, I don't like the reasons for it. And also, if we look at the dynamic just in general, Fabio Vieira being that Bukayo Saka replacement, let's say. Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, again, obviously, you'd need to see it in practice. You need them to have a lot of games. But I've never liked Fabio Vieira on the right hand side, because I don't think he's got that ability to create separation. He's someone who needs to be inside. Someone like Martin Odegaard needs to be inside. I think there is a clash there. People could say, well, Bukayo Saka and Odegaard didn't work. In theory, doesn't work. Whereas it works fantastically when you see it. But Fabio Vieira is just a different type of player to Saka, so I just don't...
And I just think it sends the wrong message,
it does
to be honest. It also messes up with his development, and we have to be fair to people. He's probably moved his whole family back to Portugal for the year, and it's just not fair. So, yeah, I think... No. It's the answer to that.
Head would be on Mars.
Head would be on Mars. Look, let's finish with this. There's a lot of potential slip-ups here. Of course, there is the world. No one is sat here denying there is the world where we don't do anything in January. We falter this season. But I can't help but feel, and I'm not just doing the false positive thing, there is also a world which is absolutely as possible where if you look at our positions in the league, if you look at how quickly things can change in football, if you look at our position in the Champions League, the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, if you look at the fact we've got a January window coming up, if you look at the comments from Mikel, the investment we've had before from the Cronkies, the fact that we've done stuff before in January, I'm not predicting anything, but I think this total doom, this season's done, is way wide of the mark. The league is a different conversation, and I've got big concerns there. But this season still be brilliant? I really think it can, and that's not. I don't try. Am I being deluded? I don't think I am, because I think you can step back and see a path out of this. When I don't see a path out of it, because I think the manager's going to just be tactically outclassed by people, I don't see that. A couple of times I've seen Mikel be tactically outclassed and then he's learned. Or, do I see the lack of player quality? Well, no, when everyone's fit, we do have the player quality, and then we can also sign players. It's a possibility. Players can improve. Players can get in better form. There is a path out of this. So I do see a lot of roads ahead. Yeah. It's just obviously a long one. It's a long road.
Like I said at the start of the podcast, it's down to the fact that we've had 2 successive title charges so far under Mikel, and we've not been able to get over the line. And then it only becomes a disaster this season if you think this is it for Arsenal, now or never, and they're never going to be able to mount another charge again. If that is your mindset, then yes, it's a disaster. But that is not my mindset, because this is a team, this is a squad that is still one of the youngest in the league, that is still learning. There's so much potential for this squad. And I know, again, we've spoken about... People who watch the podcast will know that we've mentioned problems at Arsenal in terms of tactically and things that we think we can do better many times. But the driver has been injuries this season. Gabriel's been out injured for a certain number of games. Zinchenko's been out for a lengthy amount of time. Tomiyasu's been out for the entire season. Ben White was playing with an injury this season, is now out for 3 months. Marino picked up an injury, that ruled him out for 2 months.
Calafiori, Saka, Rice, everyone.
Sterling is now injured as well, who was meant to be the Saka, backup. I've reeled off like 10, 11 injuries there that's happened this season, and we're in December. So there is a lot of context to it. Now, again, there are things that we could have done better, and we've mentioned it many times. But it isn't all doom and gloom, because when you sit back, a win against Brentford takes us back to second, and it keeps that big deficit there, obviously. But it puts us in second. We're third in the Champions League. We're in a semi-final of the Carabao Cup. The FA Cup's still there to play for. There's a lot of things still to play for this season. And, I think the worst thing would be, and this is where I look at the season now from a league perspective, stay in the race. Just stay in it, try and grind through certain games. Not every game will be pretty, and give yourself a chance. Because what will be worse if we falter now, and then Liverpool actually falter, but their falter isn't enough. That means that they have to pay the consequences. Yeah. That's the worst feeling. Leave yourself with no regrets. The only regrets that we left ourselves with last season is regrets that happened in like December. Obviously people can say, oh, well, we lost to Aston Villa, we drew at City, that's why we didn't win the league. No, we didn't win the league because in December we had that cluster in which we dropped too many points. That is a regret I can live with, because it wasn't something that happened like in the run-in or in the second half of the season. If we continue to play well at a pace that keeps us in it, and we don't win the league and Liverpool keep going, fair play to them. Fair play to them. It'll be a bitter pill to swallow, because on paper, it's a new manager who's came in, they spent no money, and he's won them the league. There's obviously a lot of other things in terms of the players they have at their disposal, but it looks bad. But what would look even worse is if Liverpool have a big drop-off, like we said, and we look back at the end of the season of, oh, what happens if we won this game at Goodison Park? Oh, if we won this game at, if we beat Fulham at home, or this, that, and the other, that happens in like March, April, and May. That'll be worse. So I'd say just try and stay within it and use it as motivation of implementing new sequences, new patterns. Mikel said it. And go hard in the cups as well. We've got a semi-final. We've got a semi-final against Newcastle. In our history, we've only won the League Cup twice. And for me, I never look to discredit any cups. You've got 4 competitions you can play for if you're a top team. Have that mindset of trying to win them all. That's what Manchester City have done under Pep for many years now. And that's what we need to do as well. There are many opportunities for us to win silverware. And I think it's very important for this team to win now. And whether it's the Carabao Cup,
even if it is a Carabao Cup, it's something.
And that could build momentum as well, Lex, couldn't it? You win a Carabao Cup, it can lift the morale, it can lift the spirits, and who knows, So it's not all doom and gloom.
For sure. Yeah, and the only thing I'd add, just to finish, is sometimes people are just better than you. Yeah. And it's not that you need to rip everything up. It's that Liverpool have had a brilliant season. It might well be, I don't think this is going to happen, but it might well be that Liverpool get 100 points And that's it. And they are one of the great Premier League teams. And you just hold your hands up and say, well, we aren't that yet. And we can get there, but we aren't that yet. And that's what it is. We'll finish there. Thank you for being here. As I always say, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, etc., etc. Spotify, Apple, Patreon reminder, all the good stuff. Thank you, Rohan.
No worries. All good. Always good to talk.
Always good to chat. Bit of Arsenal therapy. We'll be back for TCB Live on Thursday. We've got a scouted, I think, of Omar Marmoush coming out for patrons and YouTube members. Obviously, the January window opens, so we'll see a lot more stuff happening, moving. We pray. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.